The bullet that killed Daniel Pierce had been meant for another man. But that truth never brought Deanna any comfort during the 2 years she spent grieving in that small house on the edge of Chico, California, surrounded by dust and regret. The year was 1883, and Deanna Pierce had learned that promises meant nothing, that men were either violent or cowards, and that love was just a pretty word people used before they destroyed you. Her husband had been shot outside a saloon in a dispute over a card game, leaving her with a small plot of land, 3 chickens, and a heart so thoroughly shattered she swore she would never let another man near it. She was 26 years old, and she felt ancient. The ranch hands who worked the surrounding properties tried their luck with her in those first months after Daniel's death. They brought flowers that wilted in the California heat. They tipped their hats and spoke in honeyed tones that made her skin crawl. One man, a drifter named Cotton, had been particularly persistent until she aimed Daniel's old rifle at him and told him if he set foot on her property again, she would shoot first and feel nothing after. He never came back. Neither did anyone else for a while. Deanna kept to herself. She sold eggs in town twice a week, bought her supplies, and spoke to no one unless absolutely necessary. The women of Chico whispered about her, calling her cold and broken. The men called her something worse. She did not care. She had built walls around herself that were higher and thicker than any structure in that dusty California town, and she intended to keep them standing until the day she died. It was on a scorching August morning when everything began to change, though Deanna would not recognize it for weeks. She was in town, selling her eggs at the general store, when she heard the commotion outside. A horse had spooked, rearing up and nearly trampling a young boy who had wandered too close. Deanna watched through the window as a tall man in worn denim moved with surprising speed, scooping the child up and rolling away from the horse's hooves in one fluid motion. The boy was crying but unharmed. The man set him down gently, checked him over with careful hands, then returned him to his frantic mother without a word. "That is Russell Granger," said Mrs. Whitmore, the store owner's wife, following Deanna's gaze. "Bought the old Morrison ranch about 6 months back. Keeps to himself mostly. Good man from what I hear. Patient with his animals, fair with his workers." Deanna said nothing. She had no interest in good men. In her experience they did not exist, but fate, it seemed, had other plans. 3 days later, one of her chickens escaped and wandered onto the neighboring property, the very ranch that Russell Granger now owned. Deanna did not realize it until the next morning, when she counted only 2 birds instead of 3. She cursed under her breath, grabbed a burlap sack, and set out to find the wayward hen. She knew exactly where it had gone. There was a gap in the fence line between her property and the Granger ranch, a gap she had been meaning to fix for months. She found her chicken contentedly pecking at the ground near Russell's barn. She also found Russell himself, bent over a workbench, carefully bandaging the leg of a young calf. He looked up when she approached, his face weathered from sun and work, his eyes a startling shade of gray-blue that reminded her of winter storms. He was probably in his early 30s, with dark brown hair that needed a cut and a jaw that looked like it had been carved from granite. "Morning," he said simply, returning his attention to the calf. His hands were gentle, his movements deliberate. "Your chicken?" "Yes," Deanna said curtly, scooping up the hen and stuffing it into her sack. "I will fix the fence." "No hurry," Russell replied, still focused on the calf. "She is not bothering anyone. Actually, she is quite good at finding bugs. Kept the flies off this little one while I was getting my supplies together." Deanna did not know what to say to that. She stood there awkwardly for a moment, watching him work. The calf made a soft sound, and Russell murmured something soothing in response. How did it get hurt? She found herself asking against her better judgment. Born with the leg twisted wrong, Russell said. Mother rejected it, been working with it every day for 2 weeks now, getting stronger. He finished tying off the bandage and straightened, finally looking at her directly. Russell Granger, I know we are neighbors, but I do not think we have been properly introduced. Deanna Pierce, she said, clutching her sack with the chicken inside. Thank you for not shooting my hen. Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. I do not shoot chickens, Mrs. Pierce. Too useful, and besides, that seems like a lot of effort for very little meat. It is Miss Pierce now, she said automatically, then immediately regretted it. She did not want to invite questions or sympathy, but Russell just nodded, a simple acknowledgement without pity. Well, Miss Pierce, your chicken is welcome anytime. Like I said, good bug control. Deanna left without another word, but she found herself thinking about the calf and Russell's patient hands for the rest of the day. She scolded herself for it. She had no business thinking about any man, let alone a neighbor. Neighbors meant interactions, and interactions meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant pain. She had learned that lesson well. She fixed the fence that afternoon, hammering the boards with more force than necessary. When she finished, she stood back and examined her work with satisfaction. There. One less connection to Russell Granger and his two kind eyes, but the universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor. 2 weeks later, a violent windstorm tore through Chico, ripping roofs off barns and scattering debris across the valley. Deanna woke to find part of her chicken coop destroyed and her 2 remaining hens gone. She spent the entire morning searching, calling for them until her voice was hoarse, but found nothing. She could not afford to lose those birds. The egg money was essential to her survival. She was near tears from frustration when Russell appeared at her property line, riding a sturdy bay mare. He had a chicken under each arm. Found these 2 in my hayloft, he called out. Figured they were yours, seeing as they matched the one that visited before. Deanna could have cried with relief. She hurried over and Russell dismounted, transferring the chickens to her arms. They clucked indignantly but settled against her. Thank you, she managed, her voice thick. I thought they were gone for good. Storm did a number on your coop, Russell observed, looking past her. Going to take some work to rebuild that. I will manage, Deanna said quickly. Too quickly. She saw something shift in Russell's expression. I am sure you will, he said carefully. But if you want some help, I have extra lumber from when I repaired my own barn, and I owe you anyway. You owe me nothing, Deanna said, her walls slamming back into place. You returned my chickens. We are even. Miss Pierce, Russell said, and there was something patient and unmovable in his tone. I am offering lumber, not a marriage proposal. You can accept help without it meaning anything more than one neighbor being decent to another. The words struck her like a physical blow. She opened her mouth to refuse to send him away to maintain her careful isolation. But then she looked at the ruined coop, at the chickens in her arms, at her own exhaustion and pride, and something cracked. Fine, she said, but I will pay you for the lumber. No need. Like I said, it is extra. Just sitting there. Before she could argue further, he tipped his hat and rode away, leaving her standing there with her chickens and a feeling she could not quite name twisting in her chest. He showed up the next morning with a wagon full of lumber and a toolbox. Deanna had already started clearing away the debris, and Russell simply joined in without asking permission. They worked in silence for most of the day, the only sounds the hammer striking nails and the occasional instruction about measurements. Russell worked steadily, competently, never trying to take over or tell her what to do. When she made a suggestion, he listened. When she made a mistake, he showed her how to fix it without making her feel foolish. By evening, the coop was rebuilt, actually sturdier than it had been before. Deanna's hands were blistered and her back ached, but she felt something close to satisfaction. "Thank you," she said as Russell loaded his tools back into the wagon. "I could not have done that alone, at least not nearly as quickly." "You did most of the work," Russell said. "I just provided materials and some extra hands. You are handy with a hammer, Miss Pierce." "My father was a carpenter," Deanna found herself saying. "Before he died, he taught me some things." Russell nodded, and again there was no pity in his eyes, just understanding. Good skill to have. "My father was a rancher like me. Taught me everything I know about cattle and horses, though I am still learning. Always something new." Deanna wanted to ask him more, wanted to know why he had come to Chico, where he was from, what had brought him to California. But she caught herself. That was dangerous territory. That was how connections formed, and she could not afford connections. "Well, thank you again," she said firmly, a dismissal. Russell recognized it for what it was. He climbed into his wagon, gathered the reins, then paused. "If you need anything else, Miss Pierce, I am just over the fence line. And I mean that. Anything at all." Then he left, and Deanna stood in her yard feeling confused and unsettled. She did not want his kindness. She did not want to owe him anything. But she also could not deny that he had helped her without expecting anything in return, without making her feel weak or obligated. It was unfamiliar territory, and she did not trust it. The summer heat intensified as August gave way to September. Deanna maintained her routine, selling eggs, tending her small garden, keeping to herself. But she found herself noticing things about Russell's ranch. She noticed that he worked harder than any of his 3 ranch hands, that he was always the first one up and the last one to quit. She noticed that he treated his animals with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his size and strength. She noticed that he never rode past her property without tipping his hat, though he never stopped unless she clearly needed something, and she needed things more often than she wanted to admit. Her well pump broke, and Russell fixed it, refusing payment but accepting a jar of her preserved peaches. A coyote started prowling around her chicken coop at night, and Russell brought over some wire mesh and helped her reinforce the structure, then sat up 2 nights running until he scared the predator off permanently. Her fence line kept breaking, and Russell finally replaced the entire section, explaining that the wood had rotted through and it was actually a safety issue for both their properties. Each time, Deanna tried to pay him. Each time, he refused. Each time, she felt her walls crumbling just a little bit more. It terrified her. She tried to rebuild those walls. She tried to be cold, dismissive, unwelcoming. But Russell never seemed offended. He just continued being patient, steady, utterly reliable. He never pushed for more than she was willing to give. He never asked questions about Daniel or her past. He just existed at the edges of her life, solid and dependable as the mountains in the distance. It was in early October when things shifted again. Deanna was in town, buying supplies, when she overheard 2 men talking near the saloon. She recognized one of them as Cotton, the drifter who had harassed her months ago. "That Pierce widow is uppity as hell," Cotton was saying, his words slurred with drink. "Acts like she is too good for honest men, but I hear she is plenty friendly with that Granger fellow. Seems she is not so particular after all." The other man laughed, a cruel sound. "Maybe Granger is getting what we could not. Can't say I blame him. She is a fine-looking woman, even if she is cold as January." Diana felt her face burn with rage and humiliation. She wanted to march over there and tell them exactly what she thought of their filthy assumptions, but she knew that would only make things worse. Instead, she finished her shopping and left town as quickly as possible, her hands shaking with anger. When she got home, she found Russell repairing yet another section of her fence. She climbed down from her small wagon and marched over to him. "Stop," she said flatly. Russell looked up, surprised. "Miss Pierce, stop helping me," Deanna said, her voice tight. "Stop fixing things. Stop being kind. Stop making me look like a fool." Russell set down his hammer carefully. "I do not understand." "People are talking," Deanna said, hating the words even as she spoke them. "They think that you are helping me because I am giving you something in return. They think I am your mistress or worse." For the first time since she had met him, Russell's face hardened. "Who said that?" "It does not matter who said it. What matters is that it is being said, and it is happening because you will not stop coming around. So you want me to stop being a decent neighbor because some small-minded people are spreading gossip." Russell's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. "Yes," Deanna said, even though the word felt like swallowing glass. "I want you to leave me alone." Russell studied her for a long moment. "Is that really what you want, Miss Pierce? Or is that what you think you should want?" "It is what I need," Deanna said, and her voice broke slightly on the last word. "I cannot afford more gossip. I cannot afford people thinking things about me. I have to live in this town and I have to survive, and I cannot do that if my reputation is destroyed." "Your reputation," Russell said slowly, "is being managed by people who have never done a single kind thing in their lives. People like Cotton, who I happen to know harassed you until you threatened to shoot him. You are going to let people like that determine how you live." "You do not understand," Deanna said desperately. "You are a man. It is different for men. You can do what you want, be friends with whoever you want, and no one questions it. But I am a widow living alone, and every single thing I do is judged. If I am too friendly, I am loose. If I am too cold, I am bitter. I cannot win, so I have to be careful." Russell was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You are right. I do not fully understand what that is like. But I do know that you are the strongest person I have met in a long time, and you deserve better than to have your life dictated by gossips and fools. However, I will respect your wishes. If you truly want me to stop helping, I will stop." He picked up his tools and started walking toward his horse. Deanna watched him go, feeling simultaneously relieved and utterly bereft. This was what she wanted. This was what she needed. So why did it feel so wrong? "Russell," she called out before she could stop herself. He turned back, his expression carefully neutral. "The fence," she said quietly. "It really does need fixing. If you do not mind finishing, I would appreciate it, just this one last time." Something flickered in Russell's eyes. "Of course." They worked in silence for the next hour, and the silence felt different than before. It felt heavy with things unsaid, with a distance that had not existed before. When the fence was finished, Russell gathered his tools and mounted his horse without a word. But before he rode away, he looked at Deanna one more time. "For what it is worth, Miss Pierce, I was not helping you because I expected anything. I was helping you because it was the right thing to do, and because I like you, not because you are a woman or because I want something from you. I like you because you are smart and strong and you do not give up even when things are hard. But you are right that I do not fully understand your situation. So I will respect your boundaries. If you need help, you know where to find me, but I will not come around anymore unless you ask." Then he rode away, and Deanna stood there feeling like she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. The days that followed were the loneliest Diana had experienced since Daniel's death. She had not realized how much she had come to depend on Russell's quiet presence at the edges of her life. She had not realized how much she looked forward to seeing him ride past, to his respectful hat tip, to the occasional conversation about weather or livestock. Without that, her world felt smaller and grayer. She told herself it was for the best. She told herself that she was protecting herself, that she was being smart and practical. But late at night, lying in her empty bed, she could not shake the memory of Russell's patient hands bandaging that calf, or the way he had never once made her feel inadequate or weak, or the quiet disappointment in his eyes when he rode away. She had been alone before Russell. She could be alone again, but the problem was that she did not want to be. October turned cool, and the leaves on the few trees around her property began to change color. Diana continued her routine, but everything felt mechanical, joyless. She sold her eggs, tended her chickens, maintained her property. She spoke to no one. She existed rather than lived. It was on a gray afternoon in late October when everything came to a head. Diana was in town, buying flour and sugar when she saw Russell outside the livery. He was talking to the blacksmith, his expression serious. She quickly looked away, not wanting him to think she was watching him. But as she turned to leave, she nearly collided with Cotton. "Well, if it is not the Pierce widow," Cotton said, his breath reeking of whiskey even though it was barely past noon. "Not so high and mighty now that your rancher friend is not around, are you?" "Leave me alone," Diana said firmly, trying to step around him. Cotton blocked her path. "I just want to talk. Is that so bad? Or are you too good to talk to men like me?" "I have nothing to say to you," Diana said, her heart beginning to pound. There were people around, but no one seemed inclined to intervene. This was exactly what she had feared, the vulnerability that came with being a woman alone. "Sure you do," Cotton said, stepping closer. "See, I have been thinking about you, about how you need a man around to help with that property of yours. I could do that. I could take real good care of you." "I said leave me alone," Diana repeated, louder this time. Her hand moved to her pocket where she kept a small knife, but before she could reach it, a large hand clamped down on Cotton's shoulder and spun him around. Russell's face was carved from ice. "The lady asked you to leave her alone." "This is none of your business, Granger," Cotton spat. "I am just having a conversation." "No," Russell said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You are harassing a woman who wants nothing to do with you, and you are going to walk away right now, or we are going to have a different kind of conversation." Cotton looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Russell's expression made him think better of it. He spat on the ground near Diana's feet, a final act of petty cruelty, then staggered away. Diana stood there shaking, hating her own weakness, hating that she had needed rescuing, hating that it had been Russell who did the rescuing. "Are you all right?" Russell asked, his voice gentle now. "I am fine," Diana said, not looking at him. "I had it under control." "I am sure you did. But there is no shame in accepting help when someone offers it." "Is that not what I told you to stop doing?" Diana said, finally meeting his eyes. "Helping me. He was bothering you," Russell said simply. "That has nothing to do with being neighbors or friends or anything else. That is just basic human decency. If he had been bothering anyone else, I would have done the same thing." Diana felt tears threatening, and she blinked them back furiously. "Why are you so good?" she whispered. "Why do you have to be so relentlessly decent? It would be easier if you were like the others. If you wanted something, if you had an agenda. But you do not, and that makes everything so much harder." Russell looked at her with those storm-gray eyes, and for the first time, Diana saw something beyond patience in them. She saw longing, carefully controlled but unmistakable. "I never said I did not want anything, Miss Pierce," he said quietly. "I just said I would never push you for it. There is a difference." Diana's breath caught. "Russell." "I know you have been hurt," Russell continued, his voice low and steady. "I know you have built walls to protect yourself, and I understand why. I know you think all men are the same, that we all want to control you or use you or hurt you, and maybe most of the men you have known were like that. But I am not most men, Diana. I am just me. And what I want is to know you, really know you, to earn your trust bit by bit, day by day, for however long it takes, even if it takes years, even if it never happens at all, but I will not lie and say I do not want it." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the intimacy of it sent a shiver through her. She should have been angry. She should have put him in his place, reminded him of the boundaries she had set. But instead she found herself saying, "I am afraid." "I know," Russell said. "I am afraid too." "Of what?" Deanna asked, surprised. "You do not seem afraid of anything." "I am afraid that I am falling in love with a woman who will never let herself love me back," Russell said simply. "I am afraid that I am going to spend the rest of my life wanting something I can never have. But that is my problem, not yours. You do not owe me anything just because I have feelings. What you owe yourself is honesty. Stop living your life according to what gossips and fools think. Stop punishing yourself for things that were not your fault. And if you decide you want to let me into your life, into your heart, then I will be the luckiest man in California. But if you decide you do not, I will respect that too, and I will leave you alone like you asked. But at least make the decision based on what you actually want, not on what you think you should want." With that, he tipped his hat and walked away, leaving Deanna standing in the middle of the street with her world tilting on its axis. She walked home in a daze, Russell's words echoing in her head. When she reached her property, she stood in the yard and looked at everything he had helped her fix. The chicken coop, the well pump, the fence line. Evidence of his kindness, his patience, his consistent presence in her life. She thought about the calf with the twisted leg, about his gentle hands and his quiet competence. She thought about the way he had never once made her feel less than capable, even when he was helping her. She thought about the loneliness of the past few weeks, the gray emptiness that had settled over her life the moment she pushed him away. And she thought about Daniel. She had loved Daniel once, or thought she had. But looking back with clearer eyes, she could see that their relationship had been built on her youth and his charm, not on anything solid. Daniel had been reckless and selfish, always chasing the next thrill, the next gamble, the next drink. He had told her pretty lies and made pretty promises, and she had believed them because she was young and naive and wanted to believe in love. Russell had never told her lies. He had never made promises he could not keep. He had simply shown up, day after day, and proven through his actions what kind of man he was. Deanna realized with sudden, crystal clarity that she had been punishing Russell for Daniel's sins. She had been so determined not to be hurt again that she had built walls not to protect herself but to imprison herself. And in doing so, she had almost thrown away the best thing that had come into her life in years. The realization terrified her. It also freed her. She did not let herself think too much about what she was doing. If she thought about it, she would talk herself out of it. Instead, she simply started walking. She climbed through the fence line that separated her property from Russell's and crossed his pastures until she reached his house. It was a simple structure, larger than hers but still modest, with a wide porch and a barn nearby. She could see lights in the windows. She knocked on the door before she could lose her nerve. Russell answered, his shirt sleeves rolled up and his expression surprised. "Deanna." "I am sorry," she said in a rush. "I am sorry for pushing you away. I am sorry for being afraid. I am sorry for letting other people's opinions matter more than my own feelings. You were right about everything. I have been hiding and I have been letting fear control me, and I do not want to do that anymore. I want to try. I want to let you in. I want to see what this could be, whatever this is between us. If the offer is still open. If I have not ruined everything." Russell stepped out onto the porch, and the expression on his face made Deanna's heart skip. "The offer is still open. It will always be open for as long as you want it." "I am going to be difficult," Deanna warned. I am going to be scared and stubborn, and I am going to push you away sometimes, because that is what I do when I am frightened. I am not good at this, Russell. I do not know how to be vulnerable with someone, how to trust. My husband taught me that men make promises they do not keep, and even though I know you are different, it is going to take time for my heart to catch up with what my head knows. I know, Russell said gently, and I am not asking you to change overnight. I am just asking you to let me try. Let me show you what it is like to be with someone who keeps his promises. Let me prove to you that not all men are the same. We will go as slow as you need. And if you need to push me away sometimes, that is all right. I will still be here when you are ready to pull me back. Deanna felt tears spilling down her cheeks, but they were not tears of sadness. How are you so patient? Because you are worth being patient for, Russell said simply. He reached out and gently wiped away her tears with his thumb. Because when I look at you, I see someone brave and strong who has survived things that would have broken other people. Because I think you are remarkable, Deanna Pierce, and I would wait a lifetime for a chance to be with you. Deanna let out a shaky laugh. You might regret saying that. Never, Russell said, and the certainty in his voice made something warm unfurl in Deanna's chest. So what happens now? She asked. Russell smiled, and it transformed his whole face. Now I ask if I can court you properly. Which means I come calling at respectable hours, and I bring you flowers that will probably wilt in the heat, and I take you on chaperone picnics, and I bore you with stories about cattle and horses, until you wonder what you ever saw in me. Deanna laughed, a real laugh, the first one she had felt bubble up from her chest in years. That sounds terrible. It does it not? Russell agreed, his smile widening. But those are the rules for proper courtship, and I intend to do this right. I want everyone in this town to know that I am courting you honorably. I want them to see that you are a respectable woman being courted by a respectable man. I want to take away every bit of ammunition those gossips might have. Deanna felt her heart swell. Of course, Russell would think of that. Of course, he would want to protect her reputation even while pursuing a relationship with her. Thank you, she whispered. Nothing to thank me for, Russell said. Now, it is getting late and it is not proper for you to be here alone after dark. Let me walk you home. They walked back across the darkening fields, not touching but close enough that Deanna could feel the warmth of his presence. When they reached her property, Russell stopped at the fence line. Can I come calling tomorrow? He asked. Proper daylight hours, naturally. Yes, Deanna said. I would like that. Russell tipped his hat, and Deanna watched him walk away, feeling lighter than she had in years. He showed up the next morning at 10 o'clock, freshly shaved and dressed in his best clothes. He brought flowers, yellow wildflowers that he had clearly picked himself. Deanna invited him inside for coffee, leaving the door open for propriety's sake, and they talked. Really talked for the first time. Russell told her about growing up in Wyoming, about his father teaching him to work with cattle, about deciding to move to California to start his own ranch. Deanna told him about her father, about learning carpentry at his side, about marrying Daniel too young and realizing too late that love required more than pretty words. You miss him? Russell asked gently. Deanna considered the question honestly. I miss who I thought he was. I miss the illusion. But the real Daniel? No, he was not a bad man exactly, but he was not a good partner. He made decisions without consulting me. He spent money we did not have. He took risks that endangered both of us. I grieved when he died, but I think I was grieving the future I thought I would have, not the man himself. Russell nodded thoughtfully. That makes sense. Grief is complicated. It is not always about the person we lost. Sometimes it is about the life we thought we would have. What about you? Deanna asked. Have you ever been in love before? Once, Russell admitted. When I was 22, her name was Margaret. We were engaged, actually. But 2 months before the wedding, she ran off with a traveling salesman, said ranch life was too hard, too isolated. Said she wanted excitement and adventure, not cows and endless work. I am sorry, Deanna said softly. Russell shrugged. I was hurt at the time, angry too, but looking back I am grateful. We would have made each other miserable. She would have resented the ranch, and I would have resented her resentment. Better to find out before the wedding than after. Is that why you moved to California? To get away from the memories? Partly, Russell said. But mostly I moved because I wanted something of my own. My father's ranch in Wyoming is successful, and my brothers will inherit it. I wanted to build something from the ground up, to prove to myself that I could do it. California seemed like the right place for a fresh start. They talked until noon, until it was no longer proper for Russell to stay. He promised to come back the next day, and he did. And the day after that. And the day after that. He brought flowers each time, and each time they wilted quickly in the California heat, and each time Diana smiled and put them in water anyway. Russell took her on picnics, always with Mrs. Whitmore from the general store or some other respectable woman as chaperone. He introduced her to his ranch hands as the woman he was courting, making his intentions clear. He came to town with her on market days and carried her supplies, standing beside her with quiet pride while the gossips watched and whispered. Let them whisper, Deanna thought. Let them see that she was done hiding. As October turned to November, Deanna found herself smiling more, laughing more, living more. Russell was unfailingly patient with her, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. When she had bad days, when the old fears crept back in and she pulled away, he gave her space, but always let her know he was still there. When she had good days, when she felt brave enough to reach for his hand or lean against his shoulder, he accepted the contact with quiet joy. She learned that he sang while he worked, old cowboy songs and hymns in a surprisingly good baritone. She learned that he had a scar on his left shoulder from a bull's horn, and that he was terrified of spiders, but would never admit it to his ranch hands. She learned that he read poetry late at night, that his favorite meal was apple pie, and that he had a habit of talking to his horses like they were people. Russell learned that Diana had a sharp wit buried under years of guardedness, that she could calculate numbers in her head faster than anyone he had ever met, and that she had a beautiful singing voice that she only used when she thought no one was listening. He learned that she was frightened of thunderstorms because she had been caught in a bad one as a child, that she preferred coffee to tea, and that she cried at sunset sometimes because the beauty of it overwhelmed her. They learned each other, piece by piece, day by day. It was in early December, as the California winter settled in with cooler temperatures and occasional rain, that Russell asked if he could kiss her. They were standing on Deanna's porch after another proper chaperoned outing, and the sun was setting in shades of orange and gold. "May I kiss you, Deanna?" Russell asked, his voice low and careful. "I have been wanting to for weeks now, but I did not want to presume. I wanted to wait until you were ready." Diana's heart was pounding, but it was not fear this time. It was anticipation. "Yes," she whispered. "I think I am ready." Russell cupped her face gently in his large, work-roughened hands. He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind to pull away. But Diana did not pull away. She leaned forward and met him halfway. The kiss was soft, tentative, achingly sweet. It tasted like possibility and new beginnings. When they pulled apart, Deanna realized she was crying again. "Did I do something wrong?" Russell asked, concerned. "No," Deanna said, laughing through her tears. "Everything is right. That is the problem. I am not used to things being right." Russell pulled her into his arms, and Diana let herself be held. She rested her head against his chest and listened to the steady beat of his heart, and for the first time in years she felt safe. "I love you," Russell said quietly. "I know it is probably too soon to say it, and I do not expect you to say it back. But I wanted you to know. I love you, Diana Pierce. I love your strength and your stubbornness and the way you face the world even when you are afraid. I love that you do not give up, that you rebuilt your life after losing everything. I love the way you care for your chickens and the way you bite your lip when you are concentrating on something. I love everything about you, and I just needed you to know." Diana pulled back enough to look up at him. She saw nothing but honesty in his eyes, nothing but love freely offered without expectation of return. And she realized that she had been in love with him for weeks now, maybe even months. She had just been too scared to admit it. "I love you too," she said, and the words felt like breaking chains. "I love you, Russell Granger. I love your patience and your kindness and the way you never make me feel weak even when you are helping me. I love that you sing to your horses and that you saved a calf that everyone else would have given up on. I love how safe I feel with you, how seen. I was so sure I would never love anyone again, that I was broken beyond repair. But you showed me I was wrong. You showed me what real love looks like." Russell's smile was brighter than the sunset behind them. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Diana kissed him back with everything she had. Years of fear and pain melted away, replaced by hope and joy and a future that suddenly looked full of possibility. That night after Russell left, Diana sat on her porch and looked at the stars. She thought about Daniel, about the girl she had been when she married him. That girl was gone, replaced by a woman who had survived and endured and come out stronger. She did not regret the journey. It had made her who she was. But she was grateful, so grateful that the journey had led her here to this moment, to Russell. December passed in a blur of happiness. Russell continued his proper courtship, but now there were kisses on her porch and plans for the future. They talked about combining their properties, about what they could build together. Russell wanted to expand his cattle operation, and Diana had ideas about adding crops, about diversifying. They made a good team, they realized. They complemented each other's strengths and covered each other's weaknesses. On Christmas Eve, Russell invited Diana to his ranch for dinner. His ranch hands had gone to town for the holiday, so it was just the two of them. Russell cooked, or tried to, producing a somewhat burned roast and vegetables that were overcooked but edible. Diana laughed until she cried, and they ended up eating mostly bread and butter and the apple pie Diana had brought. After dinner, Russell led her to the parlor where a small Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated with simple ornaments. There was a package beneath it wrapped in brown paper. "For you," Russell said, suddenly nervous. "It is not much, but I wanted you to have something." Diana opened it carefully. Inside was a beautiful shawl, deep blue wool with intricate patterns. It must have cost him a significant amount. "Russell, this is too much," Diana protested. "No," Russell said firmly. "It is not nearly enough, but there is something else." He pulled a small box from his pocket and dropped to one knee. Diana's breath stopped. "Diana Pierce," Russell said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "I know we have only been courting a few months. I know some people will say it is too soon. But I have known since the day I met you that you were special. I have known since the day you threatened to shoot that fence post because you were so frustrated with it that I wanted to spend the rest of my life making you smile instead of frown. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that real love exists, that good men exist, that you deserve every bit of happiness in the world?" Deanna dropped to her knees in front of him, tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you. I will marry you and spend the rest of my life loving you and probably driving you crazy with my stubbornness." Russell laughed and slipped the ring onto her finger. It was simple, a gold band with a small diamond, perfect. Then he kissed her, and Deanna kissed him back, and they stayed on the floor of his parlor for a long time, holding each other and making promises and planning a future that was finally bright. They married in February of 1884 in a simple ceremony at the small church in Chico. Mrs. Whitmore and her husband stood as witnesses, along with Russell's ranch hands. Deanna wore a simple cream-colored dress that she had sewn herself, and Russell wore his best suit. The gossips attended, of course, but Deanna did not care. She stood beside Russell and said her vows, and this time the promises meant something. This time she believed them. The reception was held at Russell's ranch, now their ranch, with half the town in attendance. There was food and music and dancing, and Deanna laughed more in that one day than she had in the previous 3 years combined. She danced with her husband, and when he held her close and whispered that he loved her, she knew with absolute certainty that he meant it. Their first year of marriage was not without challenges. Combining 2 properties and 2 lives required work and compromise. There were disagreements about money and land management. There were difficult days when the cattle got sick, or the crops failed, or the well ran dry. But through it all, Russell was exactly who he had promised to be. He listened to Deanna's opinions. He consulted her on decisions. He never made her feel less than his equal partner in everything they built together, and Deanna learned, slowly but surely, to trust again. She learned that not all men were like Daniel, that some men kept their promises and meant their vows. She learned that love did not have to be painful or destructive, that it could be safe and steady and still be passionate and deep. She learned that being vulnerable did not make her weak, and that accepting help did not make her dependent. Russell learned things too. He learned that Deanna's stubbornness was actually determination, and that her walls were there for protection, not from coldness. He learned to recognize when she needed space and when she needed closeness. He learned that patience was not about waiting passively, but about actively choosing to give someone the time they needed. He learned that love was not about fixing someone, but about accepting them exactly as they were while supporting them in becoming who they wanted to be. In the spring of 1885, Deanna discovered she was pregnant. She was terrified at first, remembering the pain of Daniel's death and the vulnerability of bringing a child into an uncertain world. But Russell held her hand through every moment of fear and doubt. He attended to her every need without being overbearing. He talked to her growing belly and sang his cowboy songs and promised that everything would be all right. Their son was born in November of 1885, a healthy baby boy with Russell's gray-blue eyes and Deanna's dark hair. They named him Thomas, after Deanna's father. Holding her son in her arms, Deanna felt a love so fierce and protective it almost frightened her. But when she looked up and saw Russell gazing at them both with wonder and devotion, she knew that this child would grow up knowing what real love looked like. He would grow up in a home where promises were kept and where his parents worked together as true partners. Life continued its steady rhythm. The ranch prospered under their combined management. Deanna's business sense and Russell's cattle expertise made them one of the most successful operations in the region. They expanded slowly and carefully, never taking unnecessary risks, always planning for the future. In 1887, they had a daughter, whom they named Caroline. She had Deanna's temper and Russell's patience, a combination that promised to be either wonderful or exhausting. Probably both. The gossips eventually found new targets for their whispers. Deanna and Russell became just another stable married couple in Chico, respected for their hard work and fair dealing. Cotton drifted away years before, and no one missed him. Mrs. Whitmore remained a good friend, often watching the children so Russell and Deanna could have time alone together. Deanna never forgot the woman she had been, the widow who had lost faith in men and in love. But she also did not regret that journey, because it had led her to Russell. It had taught her what she would not settle for and helped her recognize true worth when she finally found it. Years passed in a blur of love and work and family. Thomas grew into a thoughtful boy who loved horses and poetry like his father. Caroline became a firecracker of a child who could calculate numbers in her head like her mother and who stubbornly insisted on doing everything herself. In 1889, they had another son, Michael, who was quiet and gentle and seemed to have an instinctive understanding of animals. Russell kept every promise he had ever made to Deanna. He loved her through good times and hard times, through disagreements and reconciliations, through the mundane daily grind and the extraordinary moments. He showed her, day after day, year after year, what real love looked like. And Deanna, who had once believed she was broken beyond repair, flourished. She became a pillar of the community, known for her sharp mind and generous heart. She helped other widows in town, offering both practical assistance and emotional support. She never forgot what it was like to be alone and afraid, and she made sure no one else had to feel that way if she could help it. On their 10th anniversary, Russell surprised her with a new section of fence at the property line, a strong, beautiful fence that would never need repairing. On it, he had carved their initials along with the words, "Where it all began." Deanna stood looking at that fence with tears in her eyes, remembering the chicken that had wandered through, remembering the patient man who had returned it, remembering every moment that had led them from strangers to lovers to partners for life. "Thank you," she said, turning to Russell. "For everything, for being patient, for showing me what love should be, for never giving up on me even when I gave up on myself." Russell pulled her close, and even after 10 years, the embrace still felt like coming home. "Thank you for taking a chance on me, for letting me into your heart, for building this life with me. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Deanna Granger. The very best thing." They stood together at that fence line, the place where their story had begun, and looked out at everything they had built together. A thriving ranch, a strong marriage, 3 beautiful children, a future full of promise. Deanna thought about the young widow she had been, so sure that happiness was behind her, that trust was impossible, that all men were the same. She had been so wrong. And she had never been more grateful to be wrong about anything in her entire life. As the sun set over their property, painting the California sky in shades of gold and pink, Russell took Deanna's hand and led her back toward their house. Their children were inside, probably causing some kind of chaos that would need addressing. There were chores to be done, problems to solve, a life to be lived. But they would do it all together, as they always had, as they always would. Deanna had lost faith in men, in love, in the possibility of happiness. But Russell had shown her, with endless patience and unwavering devotion, that faith could be rebuilt, that trust could be earned, that real love, the kind that lasted and deepened and grew stronger with time, did exist. You just had to be brave enough to accept it when it finally appeared, and Deanna had been brave. Not at first, but eventually. She had been brave enough to tear down her walls, brave enough to be vulnerable, brave enough to love again. That bravery had given her everything. A husband who cherished her, children who brought joy to every day, a life rich with purpose and connection, a love that was real and solid and true, The widow who had lost faith in men had found something better than faith. She had found certainty. The certainty that came from living with someone day after day, year after year, and watching them keep every promise, honor every vow, love you exactly as you deserve to be loved. As they reached the house and heard their children's laughter spilling out into the evening air, Diana squeezed Russell's hand. He squeezed back, and they shared a smile that held 10 years of memories and the promise of decades more to come. The Wild West was a hard place, full of danger and uncertainty. But it was also a place where new beginnings were possible, where broken people could heal, and where love could flourish in the most unexpected ways. Diana and Russell's story was proof of that. Proof that patience and kindness could overcome fear and pain. Proof that real love, when you finally found it, was worth every moment of doubt and struggle that came before. They walked into their home together, ready for whatever the evening and the years ahead would bring. Together, they could face anything. Together, they had already faced everything and come out stronger, and they lived, truly lived, happily ever after.